Hi, I'm Avery Davidson. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture, the only TV show bringing Louisiana farmers and consumers together every week. My partner, Kristen Oaks will join us a little later from the garden. There's a slow-moving crisis in Louisiana's soybean fields, a perfect storm, if you will. When September started, farmers were hoping to overcome the terrible market prices with what looked to be record-breaking yields. With nearly daily rains in many parts of the state, harvest has slowed to a crawl and mold is taking hold. As Twila's Neil Melanson shows us, some farmers might not even harvest their soybean crop at all.
Last week, we went out to Clayton Hurdle's sugarcane farm where the crop is growing fairly well. Across the levee, inside the Atchafalaya Basin, Hurdle also has a soybean crop, which is also doing well.
Pretty good shape. Got most of the crop out, got a little bit left. I've got storage, so that helps a lot when you're talking about damage and some high moisture.
Hurdle's neighbors to the west, though, aren't nearly as lucky.
This is this field.
Here, Neil Fontenot is showing some of the damaged beans from his farm near Ville Platte. The constant rains have caused some of them to turn white with mold, as you can see here. He's showing it to Todd Spivey, a soybean expert with the LSU Ag Center, who says prior to Labor Day, we were on track for a bumper crop of soybeans in Louisiana.
A lot of the beans that were harvested in late August, really right around Labor Day, and in the first couple weeks of September, again, like I mentioned, they were really good. We saw some really good yields across the state, fields averaging in the 90s up north, fields averaging in the 60s and 70s on the cane ground. In the southwest part of the state, we heard some numbers as high as close to 50.
All of that changed with the nonstop September rains. Spivey said the rains have kept a third of the crop in the fields where it might stay permanently.
We're going to lose a lot of harvested acres there, and then those ones that are harvested, the yields are going to be way down and damage is going to be way up.
Richard Fontenot, who farms with his brother Neil, is one of those southwest Louisiana farmers facing severe damage.
Well, in September we went ahead and we sprayed our burn down, if you will, and defoliant. And in anticipation of coming in, our 14, 20 days after that, start harvesting. And when we did come in that time period, we've had 7, 8 days of consecutive rainfall. And the crop deterioration was so rapid that when we finally got here, we had a product that was no longer marketable.
Spivey says that when a crop is sprayed with the defoliant and it rains, the moisture has nowhere to go but into the seed pod, and that's where problems start.
The pods and the beans in the field, they'll still draw in some of that moisture. And with no leaves on the plant, with no really good way to move that water off, that plant just kind of sits there holding on to that water. And that's going to allow us some disease issues to set in. We'll see some beans begin to rot as they just sit there in that water, in that moisture.
The rot results in this, piles of soybeans that will stay in the field. What I can't show you is the smell of this rot, which pervades 1,000 acres of Richard Fontenot's land. 1,000 acres, he says, will likely be plowed under.
You got a big area in southwest Louisiana had the same dynamic impact. They had a few more rains as you travel a little southwest, but unfortunately their plight is similar to ours in terms of the rainfall and harvest delays and deterioration of crops in the field. We got a lot of farmers out there that have a lot of soybeans that will not be harvested this coming year, and it's going to have a dynamic impact in the southwest part of the state as well as other areas.
Fontenot is fortunate in that he has a second crop in rice, as well as on-farm storage that many farmers in Louisiana do not. Even with these assets, it's still going to be a tough year for him and across the state. For This Week in Louisiana Agriculture, I'm Neil Melanson.
A few hours after Neil shot that story, it started raining again on Fontenot's farm, a common scenario in Louisiana right now. Soybean farmers face additional challenges when they deliver their beans as the trade war with China is stalling barges on the river. The lack of markets and storage capacity is forcing grain elevators to make some tough decisions. Many aren't taking soybeans above a strict damage limit, usually around 5%. For many farmers like Fontenot, this is an impossible standard as nearly daily rains are causing more damage like you just saw. According to Greg Fox, a grain marketing specialist with the Louisiana Farm Bureau, many beans won't even leave the field.
A lot of crops could potentially be left in the field. A lot of lost income. You look at what the situation we were in last year, we had damage limits at a lot of elevators. granted 10 to 20% damage, and some locations were able to dump anything that came across, so they were able to get that stuff out. This year, 8 to 10% damage, and that's going to have to sit in the field, so it's heartbreaking.
Crops that farmers don't harvest have an additional effect. It disqualifies those farmers from receiving the aid from the USDA to counteract the price loss from the trade war with China. In order to qualify, farmers must either deliver a crop to an elevator or have their grain in storage. That prompted Louisiana 5th District Congressman Ralph Abraham to write this letter to USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue. In it, Abraham asked the Secretary to, quote, utilize the significant resources of the U.S. Department of Agriculture to find a way to bring relief to these farmers.
What we've asked Secretary Perdue to do is look at the current situation. It is an emergent situation. It's only going to get worse if we don't do something very, very quickly. So we've asked the Secretary to look at options, look at solutions. We certainly have offered some, and get this done, but get it done quickly.
Sadly, this situation will likely get worse as farmers in the Midwest and other areas begin harvest. As Fox said, it's a heartbreaking situation and we'll be following it as the season goes on. If it's wet to harvest soybeans, then the rain is also affecting this year's cotton harvest. Pickers are in the fields in Tensas Parish, which leads the state in cotton acreage with more than 40,000 acres grown in 2017. That's according to the most recent agriculture summary from the LSU Ag Center. This week, Twila's Carl Wiggers visited a farmer outside of Waterproof, a town that has clearly not lived up to its name.
I'm Donnie Vandeven, and we are right now on one of our farms, Helena Plantation. Altogether, we had about 1,600 acres of cotton, and as of right now, I've picked about 500 of that, about 1,100 in the field. We were picking, everything was going good. We'd finally got back in the field after an 8-day rain spell. Got unlucky and got caught by another shower, and the cotton's wet. It rained for about 10 minutes, and the sun's out, and we'll just wait for it to dry up and try to go get some more. Some of my better cotton is still in the field, and if the weather will get straight, this may be top 3 crops ever for us. With after last year, and then with the commodity prices on some of the other crops, we need something to work out for us. So. On this particular farm, this 8-day rainy period, we were getting 1/10, 2/10, 3/10 a day, just gentle showers, and not a lot of heavy winds, so no cotton fell on the ground. It just was keeping the cotton wet so we couldn't pick it and bale it. If you put the cotton in these bales wet, you're asking for a lot of trouble. On some of the other farms, we've gotten more rain. One place in particular got one rain that was about 2 inches, and there's some cotton on the ground there, but minimal. I mean, it just doesn't need any more. It's getting strung out, and another big rain's gonna make it look pretty bad. The cotton had defoliated really nice and was really clean and white, but during this rain spell, it's tried to put out green leaves and start growing, and that just makes it harder to keep these spindles clean on these pickers, and also affects the grade some on the cotton from all the green leaves going in it. This year so far the crop's been really good. We need this weather to straighten up and let us get it. Most everything that we've picked so far has been in the 12 to some as high as 1,400 pounds to the acre, which is really good. We were pretty off last year due to the weather, and had the worst crop we've had in several years, so we need it this year. The inputs are higher than they've ever been, and the prices that we receive are lower than they've been in a while, and it's just got to get this crop out of the field to make it work out.
Cotton acres have been on the climb over the past few years, with grain and soybean markets back at near historical averages. Researchers at the LSU Ag Center expect that trend to continue. You may recall, Twila visited Arrington Vineyards this past January when we were in Nashville for the American Farm Bureau Federation Convention. But it was winter, so there was no grape on the vine, and no Kix Brooks either. But Twila's Tammy Arender caught up with Kix when he was back in his home parish of Franklin doing a fundraiser for the Princess Theater. She had a chance to talk to him about his winery and farm in Northeast Louisiana.
Kix Brooks is back on his family farm in Franklin Parish for a very special reason. He's doing a benefit concert to raise money for the Princess Theater Foundation. The Princess is the historic gym on Prairie Street in downtown Winsboro.
It's so important, I think, these days, especially with small towns like Winsboro, that you have a historical component and you take care of it.
So the Princess actually started as a venue for vaudeville acts. Then it moved to silent movies, complete with a pianist there to do the dramatic music. But when the malls and multiplexes opened up, well, the Princess shuttered her doors. So Brooks decided to host a Kickin' It with Kicks event. One concert at the Princess and the other at his farm in Extension. This farmland has been part of Kicks' family for generations.
Our family moved in here, I think about 1802 and 1807, started getting crops in. The Hitt family's kind of been farming our place here for a long time, and it's great to keep some of our friendships and that stuff going. But also, I think with wildlife habitat, it's something that everyone can enjoy.
Kicks took his love of agriculture with him when he moved to Tennessee. He and his business partners started Arrington Vineyards, a winery about 20 minutes south of Nashville.
Now we have beautiful rolling hills like Italy does. The soil is perfect for growing grapes. Our weather is not as good as California is, so we still bring some fruit in, but we have about 20 acres of grapes that grow really well in Tennessee. We have a 100-acre property.
There are 4 different varieties of grapes grown here and 6 different soil types, according to Kip Summers. Summers is the president and vintner at Arrington. He says the property was a pig and cattle farm before they transformed it into a winery in 2003.
Something that was very beneficial and unexpected in the sense that the land was very fertile, let's say, by the time we started planting our grapevines on it.
While Kicks is a long way from his dirt road upbringing in Northeast Louisiana, he gets the best of all worlds. A chance to be part of one of the most popular duos ever to hit country music, make some award-winning wine, and keep a connection to his family roots in Franklin Parish.
And I feel a real attachment to this place, just like my dad did. And it's something I hope my kids will continue the tradition here.
In Winsboro, I'm Tammy Arender for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture.
It's pretty neat to see Kicks take a real interest in restoring the Princess Theater there in Winsboro. So he's not only going to great lengths to be a good steward of his land, but also preserving history as well and showing everyone how to do the boot, scoot, and boogie. Napoleon is famously quoted as saying an army marches on its stomach, meaning soldiers can't fight if they can't eat. Farming and military service are related, and the LSU Ag Center is deeply rooted in bringing them together. The program is called Saluting Branches, Arborists United for Veterans Remembrance. As Craig Gautreaux shows us, on this day, tree care professionals in 34 states expressed gratitude to veterans by dedicating an entire day of service to help make national cemeteries safer for visitors.
It's called Saluting Branches, Arborists United for Veterans Remembrance. On this day, tree care professionals in 34 states expressed gratitude to veterans by dedicating an entire day of service to help make national cemeteries safer for visitors.
This is the height of their season. This is when they're making their money for the year. And they stopped work to come here and do this as a volunteer basis to help our national cemeteries honor our veterans.
One of the duties of the national cemeteries is to be a place of reverence. Maintaining the grounds is a major task, and tree maintenance is very costly. The volunteers were providing an essential service that would have been difficult otherwise.
Normally it would take us a lot of time going through our normal process to get it done. And being able to pull a group like this together would be almost impossible.
At the Port Hudson National Cemetery, volunteers had a full day's work in front of them.
Primarily, we're going to be doing a couple of removals of trees that are hazardous, and we will also be doing some lifting of canopies so that vehicles can pass under without damaging the vehicles or the trees.
Maintenance for large trees requires specialized equipment and expert operators. With a heat index above 100, these trained volunteers were showing their appreciation for America's veterans.
Sometimes it's put on the back burner in favor of other necessary work. And so this is our way as tree care professionals to come together and honor the veterans who've gone before us.
In Louisiana, volunteers were also donating their time at the Alexandria National Cemetery in Pineville. With the LSU Ag Center, this is Craig Gautreaux reporting.
Since 2015, Saluting Branches volunteers have donated more than 34,000 hours of tree care services, which translates into more than $3.4 million of donated services. Even that isn't enough to pay back the debt of those veterans. Coming up after the break, we're going to see what's blooming on the bayou. Kristen Oaks White takes us back to the Burden Gardens to see how its fall gardens can inspire your landscaping at home. Stay with us.
Farming is my way of life. I chose this career, but farming chose me.
A lot of people ask you what you do, and I tell them I'm a farmer.
I'm a cattleman.
I am a fisherman.
I'm a scientist.
I'm a steward of the land.
I am a farm woman.
I am Farm Bureau.
I am Farm Bureau.
I am Farm Bureau.
I am Farm Bureau.
I am a Farm Bureau. I now hope they're fighting today.
I hope they are. Put a Dorito on here.
I got a fish! I got a fish!
Find your place in the country and the lender who can get you there. Find Louisiana Land Bank. Financing for country homes, recreational property, farms and ranches, and agribusiness.
Louisiana oysters, salty, sweet, and delicious. But have you ever thought about what happens to all those oyster shells? Most of them end up in trash cans and landfills. The Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana is changing this with its oyster shell recycling program, and you can help by visiting these participating restaurants. It's a simple and delicious way to restore our coast. The shells will then be used to sustain and rebuild oyster reefs. Remember, once you shuck them, don't just chuck them.
Before you sweeten your morning joe, before the icing on the cake, before the sugar hits the shelf, it begins with a family of sugarcane farmers dedicated to growing Louisiana for more than 220 years. The Sugarcane Growers of Louisiana, making life sweeter, naturally.
Sugarcane, sweet sugarcane.
As hot as it's been, it may not feel like it, but fall is officially here. As summer flowers start to fade, a different cast of plants takes the spotlight in the garden. In this month's Blooming on the Bayou, Twila's Kristen Oaks White shows us how to light up your landscape with the most vibrant colors of the season.
Back to Blooming on the Bayou, and we're back again at the LSU Ag Center Botanic Gardens at Burden. And this was such a wonderful place to shoot last month that we thought we would come back again, and they have a wonderful addition to all of this fall color. And even though it may not feel like it here since it's a humid 82 degrees in Baton Rouge, it is officially fall, and now is the great time to start adding fall color into your landscapes and flower beds. If you remember from last month, we told you about the wealth of experts here that can help you with any of your horticulture needs or questions. So let's go find one that can help us add some of that fall color into our yard. Joining me today is our special guest, Jeff Keeney, and you are the director for the Botanic Gardens here at Burden at the LSU Ag Center, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And he's going to help us today with some different ways that we can incorporate the colors of fall into our landscaping.
Yeah, so this time of year, the summer landscape plants are starting to wane, and it's time to start thinking about our fall and winter planting. So we have Vinca out here today. Vinca's starting to go away, and if we wait too long to plant our winter annuals, then they're not going to take on and make it through the winter. So it's time to start thinking about taking that plant material out, do a soil test if you've had problems in your landscape, and then come back in with things like snapdragons, ornamental cabbage, foxglove, things like that, that will make it through the winter and then bloom for you beautifully in the spring.
Tell me about this ruby red plant that we've got right here.
Yeah, so this planting is a summer planting of vinca and also of coleus, and this is big red coleus. Really makes a nice difference in color and height. What we've done is we took a little bit of the vinca out and we've inserted some garden mums. The garden mums make nice fall color, so a lot of people just leave them in the container, but you can also put them in their landscape. They're gonna last for about 2 to 3 weeks. Then you'll pull them out with the rest of your summer color and come in with your fall landscape.
One thing to remember that you talked about earlier, when it comes to planting these fall annuals, timing is essential. Why is that so important?
Yeah, so what we want to do is we want to get those plants, those fall winter plant annuals established in the landscape before it gets too cold. That way they get some root development, they'll make it well through the winter, and then they'll make just a beautiful show in the spring. So what I usually try to go by is start planting your fall landscape by mid-October and try to be finished by the beginning of November. That gives you that 2 to 4 week period for them to get established before it gets cold. Then they'll set that flower bud. You're going to have green in your landscape probably December, January, but come February, March, then you're going to get that explosion of color.
We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, Dr. Keeney's going to tell us about a wonderful, underutilized fruit tree that makes a great addition to your fall landscaping.
Landowners are minding the Louisiana forest for our grandchildren. A place for wildlife, recreation, lumber for homes. It's the right thing to do. Forestry, covering half our state, all of our hearts.
This is the moment I knew his future had no boundaries.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
That's low, that's low. That's low and below.
Look, he's blushing.
Seriously.
I am a giant panda bear, loving bamboo. I almost went extinct, but I'm not because of you.
I am a grouse when I almost was too. It wasn't for the help of the San Diego Zoo.
How about you join us?
Save it as a tortoise.
We need your help to bring species back, so bring us back from the brink of extinction. Bring us back from the brink of extinction. I am the bring us back from the brink of extinction. California, bring us back from the brink of extinction.
And desert tortoise.
Now we're back after the break, and we are here at the fruit orchard at Burden, and you're going to tell us about something that I hate to admit I'm not very familiar with. I don't think that I've ever tasted, seen, touched, or know what a persimmon actually is.
So yeah, so we're here in an orchard that has Japanese persimmon trees. The United States does have an 80 persimmon tree. It has much smaller fruit than this here. And it also has astringent fruit. Astringent fruit is what makes you pucker when you eat them if they're green.
Okay.
So our fruit is mainly for wildlife, not so much for human consumption. The Japanese have bred their persimmons for human consumption, so they're much larger. They also have an astringent and non-astringent type. If it has fuyu in its name, F-U-Y-U, then it's a probably good non-astringent type, so you can eat it just like an apple.
Okay.
So this right here will taste just like an apple. I can eat it. I'm not puckering up. Whereas if I was to eat this persimmon here, I would not be able to speak. There's both, with the Japanese persimmon, there's both kind of the flat-shaped persimmon.
Kind of like a satsuma.
And then there's the more heart-shaped. Now, this is another type of Japanese persimmon. They look the same, but the fruit's very different. This one is astringent. And see how soft this one is. And what they do a lot of times is they'll cut this little cap off the top and put it on a plate. And then they're a little messy, and that's why people don't like to eat them, but you can eat that part of it. And they're one of the sweetest fruits that we have to eat. Another nice thing about persimmons are that they're parthenocarpic, which means that they'll set fruit without pollination. So you can just plant one tree in your landscape and you're going to get the fruit. You don't have to plant 2 or 3 trees in your landscape.
So you told me that so I'm going to try my first persimmon.
Yes,
Which one do you recommend?
So I would try this one first.
So you just
bite into it like an apple. There are no seeds in it.
Are hard.
It's a little bit hard. It's like an apple though. There you go. Crunchy, sweet. It's got a nice flavor.
The texture of it is what I would assume biting into a raw sweet potato would feel like.
Yeah, a lot of times people don't like the texture of the non-astringent, but what they really don't like the texture of many times is the astringent type. And you can see how kind of nasty
You said this is sweet?
get. This is very sweet, but it has that kind of slimy, as it looks, texture to it. Come on, try it.
I feel like I need a palate cleanser. Oh. I get that. I mean, the flavor of it is okay, but if you're a texture person, that is a very strange. It's like an oyster.
Yeah, it is almost. You're right. It's like eating an oyster. So,
a raw oyster.
You know, one of the things about it is the native persimmon's a really good wildlife food. So for deer and things, they love persimmons. And if you're in an area, in a rural area, and you do plant the Japanese persimmons, they're a deer food as well, and they can really destroy a tree like this. So they will crawl up and pull all the fruit down. So they're not a deer-friendly plant as far as a landscape plant goes. I believe that this is one of the very much underutilized fruit trees for your yard. In the fall, this time of year, the fruits start turning orange, and then along with that, the leaves start turning yellow, so they actually give you a little fall color too.
I was about to say, it's a beautiful backdrop for a fall.
It is. And the other nice thing about it is they don't get huge. So these get about 12, 15 feet tall. So they're a good small fruit tree to have in your yard. And then they provide this nice fruit in the fall. And once the leaves fall off, a lot of times you're still left with the fruit on the tree. And so it just kind of has that added ornamental value to it.
They say that you learn something new every day, and that's certainly true for today because I didn't know anything, nor had I ever tasted a persimmon before. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us. If you want to know more information, questions, comments about any of the topics that we talked about today, you can head on over to our website, twilatv.org, and we'll provide you a wealth of information about any of the topics that we talked about. Thank you so much, Dr. K, for joining us today. So we hope to see you again next time, Blooming on the Bayou.
That does it for this edition of Twila. Be sure to join us next week when we'll show you what's shaking in Natchitoches for the Louisiana Farm Bureau Women's Leadership Fall Conference. Until then, you can watch all of our stories online at twilatv.org, and be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. For all of us here at Twila, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again right here next week.